The mountain man appeared at Olivia Harper's broken fence line, just as the first golden rays of sunlight pierced through the rocky mountain peaks, his massive frame silhouetted against the dawn sky like something carved from the wilderness itself. Olivia stood in her nightdress and hastily thrown on shawl, staring at the destruction that had greeted her when she'd stumbled outside to investigate the noise that had woken her. 3 full sections of her fence lay scattered across the prairie grass, torn apart by what looked like a small herd of wild mustangs that had thundered through during the night. Without that fence, her cattle would wander, and she'd lose everything her late husband had worked to build before the fever took him 6 months ago. She hadn't heard the stranger approach, which should have frightened her more than it did. But something about the way he stood there, studying the damage with keen eyes the color of storm clouds, made her feel oddly safe rather than threatened. He was enormous, easily 6'4" with shoulders that strained against his buckskin shirt. Dark hair fell past his collar, slightly wild and windswept. His jaw was covered in several days' worth of beard growth, and his hands looked strong enough to snap fence posts in half without effort. "Madam," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the morning air. "Name's Dalton Irving. I've got a camp about 2 miles north in the high country. Saw what happened from my vantage point last night. Those mustangs came through like thunder. I can fix this for you if you'd like." Olivia pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, suddenly aware that her blonde hair hung loose down her back, and she wasn't properly dressed for company. It was September of 1876, and Colorado City, Colorado Territory, had become her home 3 years ago when she'd married Thomas Harper. Now, at 24 years old, she found herself a widow trying to hold onto a small cattle ranch at the edge of civilization with nothing but determination and dwindling savings. "I don't have much money to pay you, Mr. Irving," she said honestly, her green eyes meeting his without flinching. Her mama had taught her never to show weakness, even when you felt like crumbling inside. "Didn't ask for money," Dalton said simply. He walked toward the broken fence with an easy, confident stride that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin and the wild country surrounding them. "You got coffee. That'd be payment enough, and maybe you could answer some questions I have about the town. Been up in the mountains for most of the past 8 years, thinking it might be time to come down for a while." Something in the way he said it made Olivia curious, but she nodded. "I'll put coffee on. There's tools in the barn, though I'm not sure I have everything you might need." "I brought my own," Dalton said, gesturing to a large pack he'd apparently set down near her porch. She hadn't even noticed it before. "I'll get started. The sun's already climbing, and this'll take a few hours of hard work." Olivia hurried back inside, her heart beating faster than it should. She changed quickly into a simple calico dress of deep blue, twisted her hair into a practical bun, and set about making coffee and breakfast. Through her kitchen window, she watched Dalton work, and she'd never seen anything quite like it. He moved with efficiency and purpose, his muscled arms handling heavy posts like they weighed nothing. Sweat soon darkened his shirt despite the cool mountain morning, and she found herself staring longer than was proper. She forced herself to focus on cooking, preparing eggs and bacon and biscuits, because it seemed wrong to let a man work that hard on just coffee. By the time she carried a tray outside, he'd already rebuilt one entire section of fence and was starting on the second. "Mr. Irving," she called, "I've brought breakfast." He looked up, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or something softer. He wiped his hands on his trousers and walked over to where she'd set the tray on her porch steps. "That's kind of you, Mrs. Harper," he said, settling himself on the top step with a grace surprising for such a large man. You didn't have to go to such trouble. You're fixing my fence at dawn without asking for payment, Olivia said, sitting a respectable distance away with her own coffee cup. It's the least I can do. And please call me Olivia. Mrs. Harper makes me feel like an old woman. Dalton took a long drink of coffee and sighed with what sounded like genuine pleasure. Been drinking creek water and my own poor attempts at coffee for longer than I care to admit. This tastes like heaven. He paused, then added quietly, I'm sorry about your husband. I asked around town yesterday before I headed back to my camp. Folks said he was a good man. Olivia felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always came when someone mentioned Thomas. He was. The fever came on fast. One week he was healthy and strong, and the next week I was burying him in the churchyard. Doctor couldn't do anything. That's a hard thing, Dalton said simply. There was understanding in his voice, not just empty sympathy. Losing someone you love changes you down deep. She looked at him then, really looked at him. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Dalton set down his coffee cup and picked up a biscuit, breaking it open with his large hands. Steam rose from the fluffy interior. I was engaged once. Her name was Margaret. We were supposed to be married in the spring of 1868, right after I got back from scouting for the army. But I came back to find she'd married someone else. A banker from Denver. Seems she decided she didn't want to be married to a man who spent his time in the wilderness. Wanted civilization and fancy dresses and a house with real glass windows. The bitterness in his voice was old but still present, like a scar that had healed but never quite faded. Olivia's heart clenched with unexpected sympathy. She broke your heart. She broke my trust, Dalton corrected. Broke my belief that when someone says they love you, they mean it for better or worse. I went up into the mountains after that and mostly stayed there, safer with the bears and mountain lions than trying to trust another woman. Olivia bristled slightly at that. We're not all faithless, Mr. Irving. Some of us keep our promises. I promised to love Thomas in sickness and in health, and I did exactly that. I nursed him every moment of those final days, and I've kept my promise to help him build something lasting even after he's gone. Dalton's gray eyes studied her with new interest. I believe you did. I'm sorry. That was unfair of me to paint all women with the same brush because one hurt me. He took a bite of biscuit and his expression shifted to one of appreciation. These are excellent. You're a good cook. My mother taught me, Olivia said, relaxing slightly. She always said a woman should be able to take care of herself and those she loves, whether that's with cooking or handling a rifle or managing accounts. She was ahead of her time in her thinking. Sounds like a wise woman, Dalton said. He finished his breakfast quickly, thanked her again, and returned to work on the fence. Olivia went back inside to clean up and start her daily chores. She had chickens to feed, eggs to collect, and her 4 milk cows to tend. The cattle were her main concern, though. 15 head, which wasn't much but was everything she had. If she lost them because they wandered off through broken fencing, she'd have to sell the land and move into town, probably to take work as a seamstress or boarding house keeper. The thought made her stomach turn. This land, this home, it was all she had left of Thomas and the dreams they'd built together. By mid-morning, Olivia had finished her indoor chores and decided to take another pot of coffee outside. Dalton had made remarkable progress. 2 full sections were completely repaired, and he was working on the third with steady, rhythmic hammer strikes that rang out across the prairie. You work fast, she said, approaching with the coffee pot. Dalton straightened, rolling his broad shoulders. His shirt was soaked with sweat now, and he pulled it off in one smooth motion, apparently without thinking. Olivia's breath caught. She'd never seen a man built like this, all hard planes of muscle across his chest and abdomen, his arms thick and powerful. Scars marked his skin here and there, telling stories of a hard life in wild country. He seemed to realize what he'd done and reached for the shirt again. "Sorry, madam, that wasn't proper." "It's fine," Olivia said quickly, keeping her eyes on the coffee pot with determined focus. "It's getting warm. You shouldn't suffer heat stroke for the sake of propriety. I'm a widow, not an untried girl. I've seen a man without his shirt before. But not one like you," her traitorous mind whispered. Thomas had been lean and wiry, strong in his own way, but nothing like the raw power evident in Dalton's frame. Dalton accepted the fresh coffee with a nod of thanks. "I should have this finished within the hour. Then I'll check the rest of your fence line if you don't mind. Make sure there aren't other weak spots waiting to fail." "You really don't have to do all that," Olivia protested. "I want to," Dalton said firmly. His storm-gray eyes held hers. "You've been kind to me this morning, fed me better than I've eaten in months. Let me drink real coffee. Treated me like a person, not some wild thing that wandered down from the mountains. That means something." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the September sun. "You are welcome here, Mr. Irving, truly." "Dalton," he said. "If I'm calling you Olivia, seems only fair you use my given name." "Dalton," she repeated and liked the way it felt on her tongue. "Will you stay for lunch? It's the least I can do, and I imagine you're tired of whatever you've been cooking over a campfire." Something shifted in Dalton's expression, a wall coming down just a fraction. "I'd like that. Thank you." Olivia went back inside to prepare lunch, her mind whirling. She shouldn't be feeling this way, this flutter of interest and attraction. Thomas had only been gone 6 months. It wasn't proper. It wasn't decent. But Dalton made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since Thomas died, and there was something about his combination of strength and gentleness that drew her like a moth to flame. She prepared a simple lunch of cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apples from her small orchard. By the time she carried it outside, Dalton had finished all 3 sections of broken fence and was indeed walking the perimeter of her property, checking every post and rail with careful attention. "Dalton," she called, "lunch is ready." He walked back toward the house with that easy, ground-eating stride. He'd put his shirt back on, she noticed with mixed disappointment and relief. They settled on her porch again, and this time the conversation flowed more easily. "Tell me about life in the mountains," Olivia said. "What's it like to live up there alone?" Dalton considered while he ate, chewing thoughtfully. "It's hard but honest. The mountain doesn't lie to you or pretend to be something it's not. If you're strong and smart and respectful, the wilderness provides. If you're careless or foolish, it kills you. There's a purity to that I've appreciated these past years." "Don't you get lonely?" Olivia asked. "Sometimes," Dalton admitted. "Especially in winter when the snow piles deep and you don't see another soul for months. But I've had my trap line and my hunting, and that kept me busy enough. Kept the darkness at bay." "What darkness?" The question came out before Olivia could stop it. Dalton met her eyes, and she saw pain there, old and deep. "The darkness that comes when you stop believing in goodness. When you think everyone's just looking out for themselves and love is just a pretty word people use to get what they want. Margaret's betrayal, it broke something in me. Made me feel like a fool for believing her promises. Made me angry at myself for being so blind. I went to the mountains because I couldn't stand being around people anymore. Couldn't stand the risk of trusting and being hurt again." Olivia's heart ached for him. She set down her plate and turned to face him fully. "I understand that pain more than you might think. After Thomas died, part of me wanted to give up, wanted to sell this place and run back east to my family and never risk my heart again. Because loving someone and losing them, it's agony. It's waking up every morning and remembering all over again that they are gone. It's seeing their empty chair and their clothes still hanging in the wardrobe and feeling like you can't breathe. Dalton's expression softened. But you didn't run. No, Olivia said quietly. Because Thomas believed in this place, in building something that would last. And because I realized that the pain I feel, it's only there because the love was real. If I hadn't loved him, losing him wouldn't hurt. So the pain is actually proof that what we had mattered, that it was worth it. Dalton stared at her like she'd just revealed some profound truth. I never thought of it that way. Maybe that's because you never really lost Margaret, Olivia said gently. She didn't die. She just chose someone else. That's rejection, and it hurts terribly, but it's different from death. She made you feel like you weren't good enough, like she never really loved you at all, like the whole thing was a lie. Yes, Dalton breathed. Exactly that. How did you know? Because I can hear it in your voice, Olivia said. You don't talk about her like someone mourning a lost love. You talk about her like someone who had their faith shattered. You stopped trusting in love itself. Dalton set down his own plate and ran a hand through his dark hair. The sun was almost directly overhead now, marking nearly noon. You're very perceptive, Olivia Harper. I'm observant, Olivia corrected with a small smile. And maybe I understand because I've been afraid too, afraid that I'll never feel anything for anyone again. That Thomas was my one chance at love, and now I'm just supposed to exist, not really live. Is that how you've been feeling? Dalton asked. Just existing. Until about 2 hours ago, yes, Olivia said honestly. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Dalton's gray eyes searched hers. What changed 2 hours ago? Olivia felt her cheeks flush, but she met his gaze steadily. You know what changed? Don't make me say it. I think maybe you should say it, Dalton said softly. Because I've been feeling something too, since the moment I saw you standing there at dawn looking at that broken fence with determination on your face instead of despair. And I need to know if I'm imagining things or if you feel it too. Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. This was too fast, too soon. But it was also the most alive she'd felt in 6 months. I feel it. I don't understand it. I don't know if it's proper or right, but I feel it. Dalton slowly reached out and took her hand in his much larger one. His palm was calloused and warm, and the touch sent electricity racing up her arm. I came down from those mountains yesterday thinking I might try to rejoin civilization, maybe buy some land, build a cabin closer to town. But I didn't have any real reason to do it. I was just tired of being angry and alone. Then I saw you this morning, and for the first time in 8 years, I felt something other than bitterness when I looked at a woman. What did you feel? Olivia whispered. Hope, Dalton said simply. And the terrifying desire to trust again. Olivia squeezed his hand. I'm scared too. What if it's too soon? What if people in town talk? What if we're both just lonely and mistaking that for something real? Those are all valid fears, Dalton acknowledged, but I'll tell you what I think. I think sometimes life gives you unexpected moments of grace, times when the universe lines things up just right, and you can either be brave enough to reach for it or let fear hold you back. I've let fear run my life for 8 years, Olivia. I'm tired of it. So what are you saying? Olivia asked, though her heart already knew. I'm saying I'd like to court you properly, Dalton said. I know it's fast, I know it's unexpected, but I'd like to come down from my camp and spend time with you. Help you around the ranch, get to know you better. See if this thing between us is real or just a moment's fancy. Would you be open to that? Olivia knew she should say it was too soon, that she needed more time to mourn. But the truth was, she'd been mourning for 6 long months, and Thomas wouldn't have wanted her to shut herself away forever. He'd loved her generously and would have wanted her to find happiness again if she could. Yes, she said, her voice stronger now. Yes, I'd like that very much. Dalton's face broke into a smile that transformed him, making him look younger and less haunted. Then it settled. "I'll head back to my camp to get my things and be back before sunset. If you'll have me, I could set up in your barn for now, just until we figure out what this is between us." "You don't have to stay in the barn," Olivia said. "I have a spare room." It was supposed to be for guests or children, but it's empty now. You'd be more comfortable there. Dalton shook his head gently. "That wouldn't be proper, and I won't have people talking poorly about you. The barn is fine. I've slept in much worse places, believe me." Olivia appreciated his consideration for her reputation, even as part of her wished propriety didn't have to matter so much. "All right, the barn then. But you'll take your meals with me in the house." "Deal," Dalton said, standing and pulling her up with him. They stood there on the porch, hands still clasped, and Olivia felt something shift in the air between them. Something significant and a little frightening, but also thrilling. "I should go pack up my camp," Dalton said, though he didn't immediately release her hand. "Before I do, though, I want to say something." "What is it?" "Thank you for taking a chance on me," Dalton said. "For not turning me away or treating me like some dangerous stranger. For feeding me and talking to me like I'm worth something. You've given me more hope in one morning than I've had in years. Whatever happens between us, I want you to know that matters." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "You fixed my fence without being asked and without demanding payment. You saw I needed help and you offered it freely. That tells me what kind of man you are, Dalton Irving, the kind who's worth taking a chance on." Dalton lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and intimate. "I'll be back before sunset, promise." "I'll be here," Olivia said. She watched him gather his tools and pack, then stride off across the prairie toward the mountains with that confident, easy gait. Even from a distance, his broad shoulders and powerful frame made him distinctive. Olivia touched her hand where he'd kissed it and felt her heart race. What was she doing? She barely knew this man, but somehow, in the space of a few hours, Dalton had made her feel things she thought she'd never feel again. He'd reminded her that life continued, that there could be second chances and new beginnings. He'd been broken by betrayal and she'd been broken by loss, but maybe they could help each other heal. Olivia spent the afternoon in a flurry of activity. She cleaned the spare room thoroughly, put fresh sheets on the bed, and opened the windows to air it out. Then she prepared the barn, clearing space and laying out clean hay for bedding. She knew Dalton would insist on staying there, at least initially, and she wanted him to be comfortable. She also started preparations for a good dinner, deciding to make pot roast with vegetables and fresh bread. If Dalton had been living off campfire cooking for months, he deserved a proper home-cooked meal. The familiar rhythms of cooking soothed her nerves and gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. What would people in town say? Colorado City wasn't large, maybe 800 people, and everyone knew everyone else's business. The widow Harper taking in a strange mountain man would certainly create gossip, but Olivia found she didn't care as much as she thought she would. Let them talk. She was 24 years old, not some ancient crone. She had a right to companionship and maybe even love again if she was lucky enough to find it. The sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and pink when Olivia spotted Dalton returning. He carried a large pack on his back and led a sturdy-looking horse loaded with additional supplies. As he drew closer, Olivia could see more details of his possessions: furs, traps, a rifle, various camping equipment. The accumulation of years spent in the wilderness. "You weren't joking about packing up camp," Olivia called from the porch where she'd been watching for him. Dalton grinned. "When I make a decision, I commit to it. No sense leaving half my things up there when I plan to be down here." He settled his horse in the barn, unloaded his supplies, and emerged looking satisfied. "Your barn is in good shape, better than some places I've paid to stay in." "Come inside and wash up," Olivia said. "Dinner's almost ready." They fell into an easy rhythm that evening, one that felt both strange and natural. Dalton washed at the pump outside, then joined her in the kitchen where she'd set the table. The pot roast was tender and flavorful, and Dalton's appreciation was evident in the way he ate. "This is incredible," he said between bites. "I'd forgotten what real cooking tastes like." "Tell me more about your time in the mountains," Olivia said, genuinely curious. "What was a typical day like for you?" Dalton settled back in his chair, more relaxed than she'd seen him all day. "Wake up at dawn, usually. Check my trap line if it was trapping season. Hunt if supplies were running low. There's always work to do, maintaining my camp, preparing pelts, gathering firewood, preserving meat. In the evening, I'd sit by my fire and watch the stars. Sometimes I'd read. I had a few books I rotated through so many times I practically memorized them." "What books?" Olivia asked. "Shakespeare's complete works, believe it or not," Dalton said with a self-deprecating smile. "My mother gave it to me before she died. Said a man should know more than just how to shoot and trap. I also had a collection of Robert Burns' poems and a Bible, though I'll admit my relationship with religion has been complicated." Olivia was charmed by the idea of this massive, muscular mountain man reading Shakespeare by firelight. "What's your favorite play?" "The Tempest," Dalton said without hesitation. "Something about Prospero on his island dealing with betrayal and eventually choosing forgiveness. It spoke to me, though I'll admit I struggled with the forgiveness part." "Until today?" Olivia asked softly. Dalton met her eyes across the table. "Until today. You made me think differently about a lot of things, Olivia. Made me wonder if maybe Margaret's betrayal was actually a blessing in disguise. If she'd married me, I'd be living a completely different life right now. I wouldn't be sitting here with you." "Do you really believe that, or are you just saying it?" Olivia asked. "I'm starting to believe it," Dalton said honestly. "I'm not all the way there yet. 8 years of bitterness doesn't disappear in a day. But talking to you, seeing how you've handled loss with grace instead of anger, it's shifting something inside me." They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of their pasts and their dreams for the future. Olivia learned that Dalton was 32 years old, originally from Missouri, and had served as a scout for the Army before Margaret's betrayal sent him into the mountains. He'd been planning to use his military pay to buy land and start a horse ranch. "You still want that?" Olivia asked. "A horse ranch, maybe," Dalton said thoughtfully. "I've always been good with horses, had a way with them that most folks don't, but I'm also open to other possibilities now. Your cattle operation, for instance. With some work and investment, this could be a substantial ranch." "That was Thomas's dream," Olivia said. "Build up the herd, improve the land, create something that could support a family for generations." "It's a good dream," Dalton said. "Worth pursuing." When the evening finally grew late, Dalton insisted on cleaning up the dishes despite Olivia's protests. She watched him work in her kitchen, this large, capable man who'd appeared at her fence line at dawn like an answer to a prayer she hadn't known she was praying. "I should let you get some rest," Dalton said finally. "It's been a long day for both of us." "Yes," Olivia agreed, though she found herself reluctant to end the evening. "Thank you again, Dalton, for everything. The fence, the company, the conversation, all of it. Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down mountain man," Dalton said with a slight smile. "For seeing something in me worth knowing." He headed toward the door, then paused. "Olivia, would you mind if I came back for breakfast? I'd like to help you with the ranch work tomorrow if you'll have me." "I'd like that very much," Olivia said warmly. "Sunrise," Sunrise, Dalton confirmed. Sleep well. You too. After he left, Olivia cleaned up the rest of the kitchen and prepared for bed. As she lay in the darkness, she thought about the extraordinary day she'd just experienced. She'd woken up to a broken fence, and now she was going to sleep with hope in her heart for the first time in months. Dalton had mended more than just her fence today. He'd reminded her that life could still hold surprises and possibilities, and she'd done something for him too, she realized. By listening to his story without judgment, by sharing her own pain and healing, by showing him that not all women were faithless and not all trust led to betrayal, she'd started to mend the broken places in his heart. It wasn't complete healing. That would take time, but it was a beginning. As Olivia drifted off to sleep, she smiled. The mountain man had mended her broken fence at dawn. She'd mended his broken trust in love by noon, and now, perhaps, they could build something new together. Something strong and lasting, built on honesty and mutual understanding, and the courage to risk their hearts again, despite past pain. The next morning arrived with golden light streaming through Olivia's bedroom window. She woke feeling more rested than she had in months, and there was an unfamiliar feeling in her chest that took her a moment to identify: anticipation. She was looking forward to the day ahead, to seeing Dalton again, to continuing whatever was developing between them. She dressed quickly in a practical brown dress suitable for ranch work, braided her blonde hair to keep it out of the way, and headed to the kitchen. To her surprise, she could already smell coffee brewing. Had she forgotten to bank the stove properly last night? When she entered the kitchen, she found Dalton there, looking slightly sheepish. "I hope you don't mind. I've been awake for hours and finally gave up on trying to sleep more. Old habits from mountain living. I saw your kitchen light and figured it was safe to come in." "I don't mind," Olivia said, touched by his thoughtfulness in making coffee. "But you really don't have to do that." "I want to pull my weight," Dalton said firmly. "If I'm going to be here, I'm going to help. That's not negotiable," Olivia laughed. "All right then. In that case, would you mind helping me feed the chickens and collect eggs after breakfast? Then I need to check on the cattle and make sure they're all accounted for after that fence break." "Happy to," Dalton said. "I should probably ride into town today too. Pick up some supplies and let people know I'm around. Better they hear about me from me than through gossip." "That's probably wise," Olivia agreed. "Colorado City is small enough that everyone will know about you by day's end regardless, but at least this way you can control the narrative." They prepared breakfast together, moving around the kitchen with surprising ease considering they'd only known each other a day. Dalton proved competent at cooking eggs while Olivia made biscuits and gravy. As they worked, they continued their conversation from the night before, sharing more details about their lives and learning each other's quirks and preferences. After breakfast, they worked together on the ranch chores. Dalton was as capable as Olivia had expected, handling the cattle with calm confidence and showing genuine interest in her operation. He asked intelligent questions about her herd management, breeding plans, and market strategy, making suggestions that showed he'd been paying attention to ranching practices even during his years in the mountains. "You sell to the market in Colorado City?" Dalton asked as they rode out to check the distant pastures. "Mostly," Olivia said. "Sometimes a buyer comes through looking for beef to supply the mining camps up in the mountains. That's where the real money is, but it's unpredictable. I need steady income to keep this place running." "What if you had someone who could make regular runs to the mining camps?" Dalton mused. "I know those mountains better than most. I know which camps are active, which ones pay fair prices, which trails are safest. We could potentially double your profit if we marketed directly to the miners." Olivia stared at him. Dalton seemed to realize what he'd said and had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I just meant theoretically if someone were to pursue that strategy. No, Olivia said slowly. I like how you think. Tell me more. They spent the rest of the morning discussing possibilities for expanding the ranch's profitability. Dalton's knowledge of the mountain camps and trails, combined with Olivia's business sense and established operation, could indeed be a powerful combination. By the time they returned to the house for lunch, they'd sketched out a rough plan that had Olivia feeling more optimistic about her financial future than she had since Thomas died. You have a head for business, Dalton observed as they unsaddled their horses. Most people don't think about markets and strategy the way you do. My father was a merchant back east, Olivia explained. He taught me to think in terms of supply and demand, profit margins, and long-term planning. Thomas had the ranching knowledge and I had the business sense. We made a good team. I can see that, Dalton said. You've done an impressive job keeping this place going alone. I'm not alone anymore, Olivia said, then blushed at how that sounded. I mean, with you here to help, temporarily, while we figure out what we're doing. Dalton stepped closer and suddenly the air between them felt charged. Do you want it to be temporary, Olivia? Her heart raced. No, but I don't want to assume anything either. We barely know each other. Then let's fix that, Dalton said. Let me stay. Work with you on the ranch, court you properly, see where this goes. I know it's unconventional. I know people will talk. But I haven't felt this alive in 8 years, and I don't want to walk away from that feeling. Olivia searched his face, seeing sincerity and hope and a vulnerability that told her how much courage it took for him to say those words. After years of protecting his heart, he was offering to risk it again. With her? Yes, she said simply. Stay. Dalton's answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. He reached out and gently cupped her face with one large hand. Thank you. They stood there for a long moment, and Olivia thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to, propriety be damned. But instead, Dalton dropped his hand and stepped back. I should head into town, he said, his voice slightly rough. Get it over with. Want to come with me? We can face the gossips together. Olivia appreciated his restraint even as she felt disappointed. He was right to move slowly, to do things properly. But that didn't make her pulse slow down or her lips stop tingling with anticipation of a kiss that hadn't happened. Yes, she said. Let me change into a better dress and we'll go together. The ride into Colorado City took about 40 minutes. The town sat in a valley surrounded by dramatic red rock formations and towering mountain peaks. Founded in 1859, it had grown from a small settlement into a legitimate town with a main street, several stores, a church, a school, and a dozen or so side streets with houses and businesses. The railroad hadn't reached them yet, but there was talk it might within a few years. As they rode down Main Street, Olivia felt eyes following them. She sat tall in her saddle, keeping her head high. Let them look. She had nothing to be ashamed of. They stopped first at the general store, where Dalton needed to purchase supplies. The store owner, Mr. Jennings, was a portly man in his 50s who prided himself on knowing everyone's business. Mrs. Harper, he said cheerfully when they entered. Good to see you. And who might this be? Mr. Jennings, this is Dalton Irving, Olivia said calmly. He's been camping in the high country and decided to come down to civilization for a while. Mr. Irving, this is Samuel Jennings, owner of the finest general store in Colorado City. The only general store, Mr. Jennings corrected with a laugh, shaking Dalton's hand. His eyes widened slightly at Dalton's size and bearing. Mountain man, are you? We don't see many of your kind these days. Most have moved on to Montana or Canada where the beaver are still plentiful. I'm considering a change in occupation, Dalton said easily. "The mountains are beautiful but lonely. Time to try something new." "Well, you've certainly made an impression already," Mr. Jennings said, his eyes darting between Dalton and Olivia with obvious curiosity. "Folks saw you two riding in together." "Mr. Irving has been helping me with some repairs on the ranch," Olivia said, her voice firm. "I was grateful for the assistance, and he's staying in my barn while he decides what to do next. I'm sure you'll make him feel welcome in town." It was a gentle challenge, and Mr. Jennings had the grace to look slightly embarrassed at his nosiness. Of course. What can I get for you?" While Dalton purchased supplies, several other townspeople wandered into the store, clearly drawn by curiosity. Olivia introduced Dalton to each one, maintaining a friendly but firm demeanor that made it clear she expected them to be polite. Most were, though she could see the speculation in their eyes. The biggest test came when they encountered Mrs. Dorothy Fletcher, the town's most notorious gossip and self-appointed moral guardian. She was a thin, pinched woman in her late 50s who seemed to take pleasure in disapproving of others. "Mrs. Harper," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I heard the most interesting rumor about you taking in a strange man. I told everyone it couldn't possibly be true. After all, it's barely been 6 months since dear Thomas passed. Surely you wouldn't be entertaining male company so soon." Olivia felt her temper flare but kept her voice level. "Mrs. Fletcher, this is Dalton Irving. He very kindly repaired my broken fence after wild horses damaged it. He's staying in my barn and helping with ranch work. There's nothing improper about accepting help from a neighbor." "Neighbor?" Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "I wasn't aware you had neighbors in the mountains." "Madam," Dalton said, his deep voice polite but with an edge of steel. "I understand this town is small and people take interest in each other's affairs, but I can assure you that Mrs. Harper's reputation is entirely safe. I have nothing but respect for her, and I'd appreciate it if you'd extend her the same courtesy instead of implying impropriety where none exists." Mrs. Fletcher looked taken aback at being addressed so directly. "Well, I never—" "Then perhaps you should start," Dalton said calmly. "Good day, madam." He gently guided Olivia out of the store, leaving Mrs. Fletcher sputtering behind them. Once they were outside, Olivia couldn't help but laugh. "Did you see her face?" she gasped. "No one ever stands up to her like that." "She was being rude to you," Dalton said simply. "I won't tolerate that." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest. "My protective mountain man." "Damn right," Dalton said, then looked embarrassed. "Sorry, that was crude." "It was perfect," Olivia said, still smiling. They completed their errands and headed back to the ranch, both feeling like they'd passed some kind of test. The town knew about Dalton now, and while there would certainly be gossip, they'd presented a united front that would make it harder for rumors to gain traction. Over the following weeks, Dalton proved himself invaluable on the ranch. He repaired not just the fence but also the barn roof that had been leaking, reinforced the corral, and helped Olivia with the heavy work she'd been struggling to manage alone. But more than that, he became her partner in planning the ranch's future. True to his word, Dalton made a scouting trip to the mining camps in the mountains and returned with 3 confirmed buyers for beef at prices significantly higher than what the Colorado City market offered. He negotiated delivery schedules and established relationships with camp cooks and supply managers. His reputation as an honest mountain man who knew the territory gave him credibility that Olivia could never have gained as a woman. But while their business partnership flourished, their personal relationship developed more slowly. Dalton remained respectful of propriety, taking his meals with Olivia, but always returning to the barn to sleep. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds and hearts. He told her about his childhood in Missouri, his parents who died of cholera, his years as an Army scout. She told him about growing up in Boston, her unconventional mother who taught her to think for herself, her decision to come west with Thomas. The attraction between them grew stronger every day, but Dalton seemed determined to move slowly. He'd take Olivia's hand while they walked, or steady her with a hand on her back, but he never pushed for more. Olivia appreciated his restraint even as she found herself longing for something deeper. One evening in late October, nearly 6 weeks after Dalton had first appeared at her fence, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The air had turned crisp with the approach of winter, and Olivia had wrapped herself in a shawl. "Are you warm enough?" Dalton asked, always attentive to her comfort. "I'm fine," Olivia said. "Dalton, can I ask you something? Anything?" "Why haven't you kissed me yet?" Dalton went very still. "You want me to kiss you?" "I've wanted you to kiss me for weeks," Olivia admitted. "But you're always so careful, so proper. I'm starting to wonder if maybe I'm reading this wrong, if maybe you only see me as a business partner or a friend." Dalton turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "Olivia, I see you as so much more than that. I'm in love with you. I have been for weeks. But I'm terrified of moving too fast and scaring you away. You're a widow, you loved your husband. I don't want to dishonor his memory or make you feel pressured." Olivia's heart soared at his words. "You love me. How could I not?" Dalton said simply. "You're strong and smart and kind. You've shown me that it's possible to trust again, to hope again. You've healed something in me I thought was broken forever. But I know you might not feel the same way, and that's all right. I'm content to be whatever you need me to be." "You beautiful, foolish man," Olivia said, tears springing to her eyes. "I love you too. I've been falling in love with you since that first morning when you fixed my fence without asking for anything in return. Thomas was my first love, and I'll always treasure what we had. But he's gone, and you're here, and what I feel for you is real and present and powerful. Don't you dare hold back because you think you're dishonoring him. He would want me to be happy. He'd want me to live, not just exist." "Are you sure?" Dalton asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything," Olivia said. Dalton reached out and cupped her face with both of his large, calloused hands. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but Olivia had no intention of pulling away. When his lips finally met hers, it was gentle and reverent and perfect. The kiss deepened gradually, becoming more passionate as weeks of restrained desire finally found expression. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dalton rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for so long." "Then why did you wait?" Olivia asked breathlessly. "Because I wanted to be sure," Dalton said. "Sure that this was real, sure that you were ready, sure that I wouldn't hurt you or push too hard or ruin everything by being impatient. You're too important to me to risk." "Kiss me again," Olivia demanded, and Dalton happily complied. They spent the rest of the evening on that porch, kissing and talking and making plans. Dalton proposed officially, producing a simple gold band that he admitted he'd been carrying in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. "It's not fancy," he said apologetically, "but it's solid gold and I had it sized to fit you. I asked Mrs. Chen at the boarding house what size she thought you'd wear based on your glove size." Olivia laughed through happy tears. "You've been planning this." "I've been hoping for this," Dalton corrected. "There's a difference." "Yes," Olivia said, admiring the ring on her finger. "Yes, I'll marry you." 1,000 times yes." "I should probably ask properly," Dalton said, dropping to one knee despite being on the porch. "Olivia Harper, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, protect you, work beside you, and build a life with you that honors both of our pasts while creating something new and beautiful for our future." "Yes," Olivia said, pulling him up and into another kiss. "Absolutely yes." They decided to wait until spring for the wedding, wanting to give the town time to adjust to their relationship and to allow a full year to pass since Thomas's death. It was a compromise between Olivia's heart, which wanted to marry Dalton immediately, and her head, which knew that appearances mattered in a small town. But waiting for the wedding didn't mean their relationship couldn't deepen. Dalton moved from the barn into the spare room in the house, which raised some eyebrows in town, but was accepted since they were publicly engaged. They worked side by side every day, building the ranch into something more successful than Olivia had dreamed possible. That winter was hard, with heavy snows and bitter cold, but Dalton's mountain experience proved invaluable. He knew how to prepare for harsh weather, how to keep the cattle safe, how to conserve resources. And on the coldest nights, they'd sit by the fire and read to each other from Dalton's precious Shakespeare, or play chess, or simply talk about their dreams for the future. "I want children," Olivia said one snowy evening in January. "At least 3 or 4. Is that something you want too?" "I want a whole house full," Dalton admitted. "I grew up alone after my parents died, and I hated it. I want our home filled with noise and laughter and life." "Good," Olivia said, snuggling closer to him on the settee, "because I plan to give you that whole houseful." Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers and rushing streams swollen with snowmelt. The ranch had survived the winter in good shape, and their beef sales to the mining camps had given them enough capital to purchase additional cattle and improve their infrastructure. Dalton had proven his worth not just as a rancher, but as a businessman, negotiating favorable deals and establishing trade relationships that would benefit them for years to come. Their wedding took place in early May of 1877, a year and 9 months after Thomas's death. The whole town turned out, even Mrs. Fletcher, though she still looked vaguely disapproving. Olivia wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd made herself, with wildflowers in her blonde hair. Dalton wore new trousers and a white shirt that strained across his broad shoulders, his dark hair trimmed but still touching his collar. The ceremony was held in the small church, with Reverend Morrison officiating. When Dalton said his vows, his deep voice rang out clearly, promising to love Olivia in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death parted them. When it was Olivia's turn, she spoke her promises with equal conviction, her green eyes never leaving Dalton's gray ones. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Morrison said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." Dalton pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, eliciting some gasps and quite a few chuckles from the congregation. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling so widely their faces hurt. The reception was held at the town hall, with neighbors bringing food and well wishes. Even Mrs. Fletcher unbent enough to congratulate them, though she couldn't resist adding, "I suppose it's worked out all right in the end, though the haste was unseemly." "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Fletcher," Olivia said graciously, refusing to let anything dampen her joy. That night, after all the celebrations ended, Dalton carried Olivia over the threshold of their home. Their home, not just hers anymore. They'd added on to the house over the winter, building a proper master bedroom and starting work on additional rooms for the children they planned to have. "Finally," Dalton breathed, setting Olivia down gently. "Finally, you're my wife. Finally, you're my husband," Olivia echoed, reaching up to thread her fingers through his long hair. "I love you, Dalton Irving." "I love you too, Olivia Irving," Dalton said, and the name sounded perfect on his lips. Their wedding night was everything Olivia had hoped it would be, tender and passionate and full of whispered promises and discovered pleasures. Dalton was gentle with her, mindful of her relative inexperience, but as the night progressed, passion overcame restraint and they came together with explosive intensity. Afterward, lying tangled together in their bed, Dalton traced lazy patterns on Olivia's bare shoulder. "I never thought I'd have this. A wife, a home, a future worth looking forward to. I thought I'd die alone in those mountains, bitter and angry. Instead you found me," Olivia said softly, "or I found you. However it happened, I'm grateful." "So am I," Dalton said. "That morning when I came down and saw your broken fence, something told me to help. I almost didn't. I almost just kept walking, but something made me stop and it changed my entire life." "You believe in fate?" Olivia asked. "I believe in grace," Dalton said thoughtfully. "I believe that sometimes, when we need it most, life gives us exactly what we need even if we didn't know we needed it. You were my grace, Olivia. You saved me from myself." "And you saved me," Olivia said, "from loneliness and despair and the belief that I'd never feel alive again." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, warm and safe and loved. The years that followed were full and rich. True to their dreams, Olivia and Dalton filled their house with children. Their first was a boy, born in February of 1878, with his father's gray eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Thomas, after Olivia's first husband, a gesture that Dalton insisted on as a way of honoring the man who'd been part of making Olivia who she was. A daughter followed in 1879, then another son in 1881, and twin girls in 1883. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter and occasional tears, and the organized chaos of a large family. Dalton proved to be a devoted father, playing with his children, telling them stories of his mountain adventures, teaching them to ride and raid and think for themselves. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Dalton's connections with the mining camps provided steady income, and as the years passed, they expanded their operation, purchasing adjacent land and increasing their herd. By 1885, they were one of the most successful ranches in the territory. But success didn't change who they were at their core. Dalton still started most days by walking the fence line, checking for damage and needed repairs. It was his meditation, his way of remembering where he'd come from and what mattered. And Olivia often joined him, the two of them walking hand in hand as the sun rose over the mountains. "You ever miss it?" Olivia asked one morning in the fall of 1886, 10 years after they'd first met. "The solitude of the mountains, the simplicity of that life." Dalton looked back at their house, where smoke rose from the chimney and they could hear their 5 children already awake and causing some kind of ruckus. He smiled. "Not for a second. That life was about hiding from pain. This life is about embracing joy. I'll take the chaos and noise and wonderful mess of family over lonely silence any day." "Good answer," Olivia said, squeezing his hand, "because I couldn't imagine my life without you in it." "Nor I without you," Dalton said, pulling her close. "You know what today is?" "October 15th, Olivia said. "Why?" 10 years ago today was the first morning I kissed you," Dalton said. "I've been counting." Olivia laughed. "That was October 15th. I had no idea you were keeping track." "I remember every important moment with you," Dalton said seriously. "September 16th, 1876, when I first saw you at dawn standing by that broken fence. September 16th by noon when we'd talked and I knew my life had changed forever. October 15th when I finally kissed you. May 7th, 1877, when you became my wife. Every birthday of every one of our children. Every moment matters, Olivia, because every moment with you is precious. Tears filled Olivia's eyes. How did I get so lucky? How did I find a man who loves me like this? A herd of wild mustangs broke your fence, Dalton said with a grin. And a broken-hearted mountain man happened to see it and decided to help. Everything else just followed from that one moment of grace. They stood there as the sun climbed higher, two people who'd been broken by life but found healing in each other. Around them, the ranch they'd built together thrived. Behind them, the house they'd filled with love and children waited. Above them, the eternal mountain stood witness to a love story that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into something beautiful and lasting. Papa, Mama. Young Thomas, now 8 years old, came running toward them. Papa, you promised you'd take us riding today. And Mama, Lily wants you to help her with her sums. Duty calls, Olivia said with a laugh. The best kind of duty, Dalton agreed. They walked back toward the house together, their children swarming around them with demands and questions and affection. This was the life they'd built from the ashes of their past hurts. This was what happened when two wounded people chose to trust again, to love again, to believe that second chances were real. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, Dalton and Olivia sat on their porch as they had so many times before. The stars blazed overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine from the distant mountains. "You ever think about Margaret anymore?" Olivia asked. It was a question she'd never really asked directly before. Dalton considered. Sometimes, but not with anger or pain anymore. Mostly I think about how her betrayal, as much as it hurt at the time, led me to exactly where I needed to be. If she'd married me, I'd have been trapped in a life with someone who didn't really love me. Instead, I found you. Someone who loves me completely, flaws and all. I do love you completely, Olivia confirmed. Your strength and your gentleness, your past and your present, everything about you. And I love you the same way, Dalton said. Olivia, I need you to know something. That first day when I fixed your fence and you fed me and we talked, you did more than just show me kindness. You showed me that it was possible to trust again. You were honest about your pain, but you hadn't let it make you bitter. You'd lost someone you loved, but you hadn't closed yourself off to the possibility of loving again. Seeing that courage, that openness, it challenged me. It made me want to be brave enough to try again. I wasn't being brave, Olivia protested. I was just being myself. Exactly, Dalton said. You were authentic and real, and that's what I needed to see. That's what started to heal me. By noon that day, I already knew you were special. I knew you were someone worth risking my heart for. You mended my broken trust in love just by being who you are. And you mended my broken heart just by showing up, Olivia said. By being kind and capable and exactly what I needed even though I didn't know I needed it. We saved each other, Dalton. Yes, Dalton agreed. We did. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the stars wheel overhead. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, their ranch dozed peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys as every tomorrow did. But whatever came, they would face it together. You know what I'm most grateful for? Olivia asked eventually. Tell me. That I didn't let fear hold me back, Olivia said. That first day, I could have told you thank you for fixing the fence and sent you on your way. I could have been too scared of what people would think, or too worried about dishonoring Thomas's memory, or too cautious about opening my heart again. But I chose to be brave. I chose to see where it might lead, and it led to this, to us, to everything we've built. I'm grateful I was brave enough to take that chance. I'm grateful you were brave too, Dalton said. And I'm grateful I was brave enough to come down from those mountains, to risk being hurt again, To believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be real and lasting and true. You proved that it could be, Olivia. Every single day you prove it. The years continue to roll by, bringing changes and challenges but always undergirded by the solid foundation of Dalton and Olivia's love. Their children grew strong and capable, taught by their parents to be honest, hardworking, and kind. Young Thomas showed signs of inheriting his father's way with horses and his mother's business sense. The oldest daughter, Sarah, had her father's gray eyes and a fierce protective streak toward her younger siblings. The middle son, James, was quieter but thoughtful, always watching and learning. The twin girls, Lily and Rose, were bundles of energy who kept everyone on their toes. In 1890, Colorado became a state rather than a territory, and Colorado City celebrated with a massive festival. Dalton and Olivia attended with their whole family, now pillars of the community rather than subjects of gossip. Mrs. Fletcher, now quite elderly, even approached them at one point. "I'll admit I was wrong about you too," she said grudgingly. "I thought it was too fast, too scandalous, but you've built a good life and raised fine children. I suppose sometimes the heart knows what the head cannot understand." "Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher," Olivia said graciously. "That means a great deal." After the old woman walked away, Dalton chuckled. Did Mrs. Fletcher just admit she was wrong? That might be the most surprising thing that's ever happened. "People can change," Olivia said philosophically. "Look at us. You were a bitter mountain hermit, and I was a grieving widow convinced she'd never feel joy again. Now look at us." Dalton pulled her close, right there in the middle of the festival crowd, and kissed her thoroughly. Their children groaned in mock embarrassment, but there was love in their eyes as they watched their parents. "Get a room," young Thomas called out, now a strapping 14-year-old who was already nearly as tall as his father. "Mind your manners," Dalton called back, but he was grinning. "Someday you'll understand. When you fall in love," Olivia added, "you'll realize that kissing the person you love never gets old, no matter how many years pass." As the sun set on the celebration, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the Irving family headed home to their ranch. The children chattered excitedly about the festivities while Dalton drove the wagon and Olivia sat beside him, her hand resting on his thigh in comfortable intimacy. "Happy?" Dalton asked quietly. "Incredibly," Olivia confirmed. "You, more than I ever thought possible," Dalton said. "Do you remember what I said that first day? About how the mountain doesn't lie, how it's pure and honest?" "I remember." "I was wrong," Dalton said. "Or at least incomplete. The mountain is honest, but it's also lonely. True happiness isn't found in isolation from pain. It's found in connection despite pain. It's found in risking your heart even when you're scared. It's found in choosing love over fear." "When did you become such a philosopher?" Olivia teased gently. "When I fell in love with a woman smart enough to teach me that bitterness was a choice, not a requirement," Dalton said. "You changed how I see everything, Olivia. You changed me down to my core." "And you changed me," Olivia said. "You taught me that life continues after loss. That loving again doesn't mean forgetting what came before. That there's enough room in a heart for both grief and joy, memory and hope, past and future." They arrived home as the last light faded from the sky. The children scattered to their various evening routines while Dalton unhitched the horses, and Olivia went inside to bank the fire and prepare for the next day. These small domestic rituals had become sacred to both of them, reminders of the life they'd built through hard work and dedication and love. Later, in the privacy of their bedroom, Dalton pulled Olivia into his arms. Even after 13 years of marriage, his touch still sent electricity through her. They came together with the easy passion of long practice mixed with genuine desire that hadn't faded with time. "I love you," Dalton murmured against her skin. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "I love you too," Olivia whispered back. "My mountain man who came down from the wilderness and saved me." "You saved me first," Dalton corrected. "I was already broken when I found you. You're the one who did the saving." "Then we saved each other," Olivia said. "And we'll keep saving each other every day for the rest of our lives." And they did exactly that. Through the years that followed, through challenges and triumphs, through the trials of raising children and running a ranch and building a legacy, Dalton and Olivia continued to choose each other every single day. They faced droughts and harsh winters, sick children and financial pressures, the normal struggles of any life. But they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Their children grew up and started families of their own, some staying close to the ranch and others venturing out to seek their fortunes. But all of them carried with them the lessons their parents had taught. That love is real, that second chances are possible, that courage means being willing to risk your heart, and that the most important thing in life is choosing each other over and over again. By 1910, Dalton and Olivia were grandparents many times over. Their ranch had grown into a substantial operation, employing dozens of workers and supplying beef throughout Colorado. But success hadn't changed them. They still started most mornings walking the fence line together, still sat on their porch in the evenings watching the stars, still held hands like newlyweds despite the gray in their hair and the lines on their faces. "You remember that morning?" Olivia asked one September day, standing near the spot where Dalton had first mended her broken fence. It had been 34 years, and the memory was still crystal clear. "Every detail," Dalton said. "You standing there in your nightdress and shawl, looking at that broken fence with determination instead of despair. The sun coming up behind the mountains. The way my heart kicked in my chest when you looked at me with those green eyes. I remember thinking this woman is going to change my life, and I was right. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen," Olivia admitted. "This massive man with kind eyes appearing out of nowhere to help me, like something out of a fairy tale." "Not so massive anymore," Dalton said ruefully, though at 66 he was still strong and capable, still beautiful to me, Olivia insisted. "Still my mountain man." "Always," Dalton said, pulling her close. "Always yours from that first dawn until my last breath." They stood there in the morning light, two people who had found each other at exactly the right moment. Two broken people who had healed each other through the simple act of choosing love over fear, trust over bitterness, hope over despair. The fence Dalton had mended that September morning in 1876 had long since been replaced and replaced again. But the metaphorical fence he'd mended, the one around Olivia's grieving heart, had held strong. And the trust Olivia had mended, Dalton's broken belief in love, had proven unshakable. They had taken their broken pieces and built something beautiful. They had proven that endings can become beginnings, that loss can lead to finding, that dawn always comes after the darkest night. They had shown their children and grandchildren what real love looked like. Not perfect, not without challenges, but committed and genuine and strong enough to weather any storm. As they walked back toward their house, toward the life they'd built together over 34 remarkable years, both Dalton and Olivia felt profound gratitude. For wild mustangs that had broken a fence, for a mountain man who had chosen to help instead of walking past, for a widow who had been brave enough to trust again, for coffee and conversation that had turned into something infinitely precious. "Thank you," Olivia said softly. "For what?" Dalton asked. for mending my fence that morning," Olivia said. "For staying, for loving me, for building this life with me, for everything." "Thank you for mending my broken heart," Dalton replied, "for showing me that love was real, for being brave enough to take a chance on a bitter mountain man, for making me believe in happy endings." They reached their porch and settled into the chairs they'd sat in thousands of times before, watching the ranch wake up around them. Their grandchildren would be arriving later for Sunday dinner, filling the house with noise and laughter just as their own children once had. Life continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of love and trust that Dalton and Olivia had established all those years ago. "Do you know what the best part is?" Olivia asked. "Tell me." "We still have more mornings ahead of us," Olivia said. "More sunrises to watch together, more fences to mend literally and figuratively, more years to keep choosing each other. This story isn't over yet." "No," Dalton agreed, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "It's not over, not by a long shot. We've got plenty of chapters left to write," and they did. Many more years of mornings and evenings, of challenges overcome and joys celebrated, of love deepening and growing even stronger with time. The mountain man who had mended her fence at dawn, and the widow who had mended his trust in love by noon, created a legacy that lasted far beyond their own lives. Their descendants would tell the story for generations. How their great-great-grandparents had met by chance on a September morning, how they'd healed each other's wounds and built something lasting and true. They'd tell it as a love story for the ages, proof that second chances are real, and that the bravest thing anyone can do is risk their heart one more time. But Dalton and Olivia never thought of their story as particularly extraordinary. To them, it was simple. They had found each other when they most needed found. They had chosen courage over fear. They had believed in love even when it seemed impossible. And they had built a life together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of grace after another. That was their secret, their lasting gift to everyone who came after them. That love is always possible if you're brave enough to try. That broken things can be mended. That dawn always comes, and that sometimes the best things in life start with a simple act of kindness on an ordinary September morning. The end came peacefully for both of them, many years later, within days of each other. They had lived long, full lives and had no regrets. Their children and grandchildren gathered to say goodbye, and every one of them carried forward the legacy of love and courage and trust that Dalton and Olivia had exemplified. On a cool September morning, not so different from the one when they'd first met, their youngest granddaughter stood by the fence line of what was now a thriving ranch empire. She thought about the story she'd heard her whole life, about the mountain man and the widow who had saved each other through simple kindness and brave hearts. Looking up at the mountains where her great-grandfather had once lived in lonely isolation, she whispered a thank you to the wild mustangs who had broken a fence all those years ago, setting in motion a love story that had touched so many lives. Then she turned back toward the house, toward her own future, carrying with her the lessons her great-grandparents had taught. That love is worth the risk, that broken things can be mended, and that grace appears when we need it most if we're brave enough to recognize it and wise enough to embrace it. The ranch continued to thrive for generations, but more important than the land or the cattle or the financial success was the legacy of love that Dalton and Olivia had created. Every marriage in their family was strengthened by their example. Every challenge was met with the courage they had demonstrated. Every child born into the family grew up hearing the story of how it all began, on a September dawn in 1876, when a mountain man mended a broken fence and a widow mended a broken heart. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist still clung to the valleys and the sun was just beginning to paint the mountain peaks with gold, those who were particularly attuned to such things could almost sense them still there. Dalton and Olivia, walking hand in hand along the fence line they had walked together for so many years, their love eternal and unbreakable, a testament to the power of second chances and the courage to trust again. Their story lived on, inspiring others to be brave, to be kind, to be open to the unexpected moments of grace that can change everything. And in that way, the mountain man and the widow who had saved each other on a long-ago September day continued to save others, generation after generation, proving that true love never really ends. It transforms, it multiplies, it spreads outward in ever-widening circles, touching lives in ways both seen and unseen. That was the real legacy of Dalton and Olivia Irving, not the successful ranch or the substantial fortune, but the love they had built and the courage they had shown, and the hope they had given to everyone who came after them. A hope that said broken fences could be mended, broken hearts could heal, and broken trust could be restored if two people were brave enough to try. And so their story ended where it began, with a fence and a dawn and two people brave enough to reach for a second chance at love.